So President Trump campaigned on ending the Russia-Ukraine war on day one of his administration. And we are 7 months into his administration and no ceasefire has occurred. And rampant shipment of USA weapons has been delivered to Ukraine. Russia is escalating the war and is not near for any ceasefire. And Trump says he is not happy with Putin.
The question here is, would you give Ukraine weapons and funding if you were elected?
I would sit down. Let me just put it a nicer way. If I'm president, I will have that war settled in 1 day, 24 hours.
How would you settle that war in 1 day?
Because I'll meet with Putin, I'll meet with Zelensky. They both have weaknesses and they both have strengths. And within 24 hours, that war will be settled. It'll be over.
You've said very boldly you could end this Ukrainian-Russia war in 24 hours.
Yeah.
How?
I would tell Putin, got to settle. I would tell Zelensky, you got to settle. I would tell one, you're going to load up with money. I'd tell the other, you're not going to get any money. I would get a settlement in 24 hours.
Now, the Trump administration halted its weapon shipment to Ukraine, including air defenses, interceptors, and ammunitions to the Ukrainian army as it did not want to escalate the war. Now, according to the Kiev Independent, this was after Russia launched its missile attacks deep into Ukrainian territories. Zelensky, Trump discuss air defense, joint drone production amid Russian strikes. Now the report ensues on Trump's interaction with Zelensky, agreeing upon strengthening Ukrainian air defenses. President Zelensky and US President Donald Trump held a phone conversation, agreeing to strengthen Ukraine's air defenses. This call came right after Russia launched an aerial campaign on Ukrainian territories and struck key region in Ukraine, injuring over a few dozen people and starting wildfires. President Zelensky and US President Donald Trump held a phone conversation, agreeing to strengthen Ukrainian air defenses. The call came as Russia escalated its aerial campaign across Ukraine, including an overnight July 4th attack that struck Kyiv and several other regions, injuring at least 23 civilians and sparking dozens of fires in the capital. Zelensky says he told Trump, "Today we discussed the situation, Russian airstrikes, and more broadly, the situation on the front lines. President Trump is well informed," Zelensky said. "We discussed the air defense options and agreed to work upon increasing airspace protection. We agreed on a meeting between our teams." Now, in the same report, it suggested that Trump had called the Kremlin, and Putin reassured to Trump that this conversation followed a phone call between Trump and Russian President Putin on July 3rd, during which the Kremlin said Putin reaffirmed that Russia will continue to pursue its goals in its war against Ukraine, despite the US calls for a ceasefire. Trump told reporters on July 3rd that he was very disappointed by the conversation with Putin. "I don't think he's there. I don't think he's looking to stop this fighting."
Mr. President, could you provide us an update on Russia and Ukraine as well?
Yeah, I'll give you an update. I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all, okay? We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all.
Now, in February, Zelensky visited the White House, and the focus of the meeting was that Zelensky would sign the minerals deal, and that would be of some assurance to the United States that the United States will have some stake in the war. But when Vice President JD Vance started his remarks by criticizing the Joe Biden administration on its compliance on not finding a diplomacy to end the war rather than escalating the war, and then praised Donald Trump on his condemnation to pursue diplomacy with the Russians. Now, this led to Zelensky essentially making a fool out of himself. And then Trump jumps in by stating that he is trying to end this war and that Zelensky is pushing for World War III.
For 4 years in the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked tough about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy. We tried the pathway of Joe Biden of thumping our chest and pretending that the President of the United States' words mattered more than the President of the United States' action. What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So he occupied our parts, big parts of Ukraine, part of East and Crimea. So he occupied it on 2014. So during a lot of years, so I'm not speaking about just Biden, but those time was Obama, then President Obama, then President Trump, then President Biden, now President Trump, and God bless, now President Trump will stop him. But during 2014, nobody stopped him. He just occupied and took. He killed people, you know, my bilateral conversation. And we signed with him, me, like a new president. In 2019, I signed with him the deal. I signed with him, Macron and Merkel, we signed ceasefire. He broken this ceasefire. He killed our people. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean? Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
that.
You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because
I'm
you're in no
answering on this
position to
question.
dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly what
this.
you're doing.
I'm not
You're in
dictating.
no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I
You
will
don't
say
have
that-
the cards right now. With us, you start having
not
cards.
playing cards.
Right now, you don't.
I'm very
You're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War
What you're-
III.
what you're
You're
speaking about?
gambling with
What you're
World
speaking
War
about?
III.
Now remember that Ukraine has the backing of the European nations and the United States. And I believe that Zelensky made a point that Russia is not someone you could deal with. Ukraine launched a sophisticated attack called Operation Spiderweb on key Russian sites. How Ukraine carried out daring spiderweb attack on Russian bombers. It was an attack of astonishing ingenuity, unprecedented, broad, and 18 months in the making. On 1st of June, more than 100 Ukraine drones struck air bases deep inside Russia, targeting nuclear-capable long-range bombers. Explosion reported across several time zones all over Russia, as far north as Murmansk above the Arctic Circle and far east as Tutursk, over 4,000 kilometers from Ukraine. The Russian Defense Ministry confirmed the attacks had occurred in 5 regions of Russia: Murmansk, Trix, Ivanova, Ryazan, and Amur, but stated planes had been damaged only in Murmansk and Irkutsk, while in other locations the attacks had been repelled. Photos released shortly after the attack can be seen looking at a satellite map of airfields in which the bases in the locations listed by Russia are clearly identifiable. Maluk said the drones were first smuggled into Russia, then placed inside wooden cabins mounted on the back of lorries and concealed below remotely operated detachable roofs. The lorries were then apparently driven to locations near air bases by drivers who were seemingly aware of the cargo. Then the drones were launched and set upon their targets. Some of them received further instructions over the phone on where to park the lorries. When they did so, they were stunned to see drones fly out of them. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who directly supervised the operation, said 117 drones had been used in this daring attack that took over 1 year, 6 months and 9 days to prepare. Images shared by the SBU show dozens of small black drones neatly stashed in wooden cabins inside a warehouse, which Russian military bloggers pinpointed to a location in Chelyabinsk. Dr. Steve Wright, a UK-based drone expert, told the BBC the drones used to hit Russian aircraft were simply quadcopters carrying relatively heavy payloads. He added that what made this attack quite extraordinary was the ability to smuggle them into the Russian and then launch and command them remotely, which he concluded had been achieved through a link relayed through a satellite or the internet. Zelensky said each of the 117 drones launched had its own pilot. Dr. Wright also suggests it was likely the drones were able to fly in using GPS but may have also overcome localized Russian jamming measures by manually piloting drones remotely. Now the targets were Russia had a very tangible losses, and justifiably so, said Zelensky in his nightly video address. According to Ukraine, 41 strategic bombers were hit and at least 13 destroyed. Moscow had not confirmed any losses of aircraft beyond saying that some planes had been damaged. The strategic missile-carrying bombers targeted in the attack are thought to be, among others, the Tu-95, Tu-22 and the Tu-160. Repairing them will be difficult, and because none of them are still in production, replacing them is impossible. The Tu-95 bombers are said to have launched large-scale Kh-101 missile attacks on Ukraine as recently as last week. Each bomber can carry 8 guided cruise missiles, and each missile itself carries 400 kilos warhead. A-50 military supplies, A-50 military spy planes were also reportedly targeted. They are valuable aircraft that boost Russia's ability to both intercept Ukrainian missiles and launch its own strikes. You see, one of the main reasons why this war even began was due to, under the Obama administration, the State Department overthrew the Ukrainian government at the time in 2014, and the West's constant theme of bringing Ukraine into NATO, and Russia had made it very clear that Ukraine cannot join NATO, and it was one of their brightest of red lines, and that if they were to join NATO, Russia would invade and take Ukraine. In 2008, while serving as the US ambassador to Russia, William Burns was explicitly warned by the senior Kremlin officials that Ukraine's potential membership of NATO was unacceptable provocation and a clear red line for Moscow. Burns and later documented these concerns in a classified diplomatic cable to the Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, titled the Niet Yet Memo, Russia's NATO Enlargement Red Lines. The memo detailed Russia's deep-seated opposition to NATO expansion and had warned of possible destabilizing consequences. This was later made public through the WikiLeaks disclosure. And then later the United States overthrew the Yanukovych government in 2014, and this led to the Russians invading Ukraine and taking over Crimea. And then in early 2022, the Joe Biden administration proposed the idea of Ukraine joining NATO, and then had sent Vice President Kamala Harris to the NATO summit, in which she talked about that Ukraine might join NATO. And then 9 days later, Russia invaded Ukraine. But we have to remember, in early of the war, Russia did call for a ceasefire and did not want to escalate the war at the Istanbul summit. But Joe Biden sent Prime Minister Boris Johnson of the UK and told him to kill off the deal, and that the West and the United States were with Ukraine in its war against Russia. You see, the West and the United States just wanted to bleed Russia economically and hurt Russian army by leading to mass death. Now, President Trump is very upset with Putin because Putin is not coming to the negotiating table. Now, according to the NBC, Trump says he's very angry with Putin over Ukraine. You see, Trump has been pushing for a speedy end to the war. US President Donald Trump said he was very angry with the Russian leader Vladimir Putin. And then Trump carried on by saying that Mr. Trump said that if Russia and I are unable to make a deal on stopping the bloodshed in Ukraine, and if I think it was Russia's fault, then he would impose secondary tariff on all oil coming out of Russia. And then Trump later adds on, I was very angry, pissed off at Putin. President Trump administration has failed to reach a breakthrough despite talking with both sides. Mr. Putin rejected a joint US-Ukrainian plan for a 30-day ceasefire, and on Friday suggested Mr. Zelensky be removed from his office as part of the peace process. Mr. Trump told NBC that Mr. Putin knows he is very angry, but said that he has a very good relationship with him, and the anger dissipates quickly if he does the right thing. India is the highest purchaser of Russian oil. India purchases over 35% of Russian oil, which is fueling Russia's economy, and that Russia is able to carry out this war. Explaining the secondary tariff threat, Mr. Trump told NBC, that would be that if you buy oil from Russia, you cannot do business in the United States. There will be a 25% tariff on all oil, a 25 to 50 point tariff on all oil, he added. India has surpassed China to become the biggest buyer of seaborne Russian crude, which comprised about 35% of India's total crude imports in 2024.
And one of the reasons that you're here today is to hear that we are very unhappy, I am, with Russia. But we'll discuss that maybe a different day. But we're very, very unhappy with them, and we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. Tariffs at about 100%. You'd call them secondary tariffs. You know what that means. But today we're going to talk about something else. And as you know, we've spent $350 billion approximately on this war with Russia and Ukraine. And would like to see it end. It wasn't my war, it was Biden's war. It's not my war, I'm trying to get you out of it. And we want to see it end. And I'm disappointed in President Putin because I thought we would have had a deal 2 months ago, but it doesn't seem to get there. So based on that, we're going to be doing secondary tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. It's very simple. And they'll be at 100%.
And that's the way it is. It can be more simple. It's just the way it is. I hope we don't have...
Now, Putin has heavily implied that Ukraine must surrender in its totality. And Putin tells Trump, according to the Al Jazeera, Russia will not back down on Ukraine's war goals, Putin tells Trump. Russian President Putin has told his United States counterpart Donald Trump that Moscow will not give up on its goal of eliminating the root causes of the war in Ukraine. Russia will not back down, he said. Trump said after the call he had made had no progress, adding that he was not happy about the war in Ukraine. Now, the Trump administration is possibly looking to supply Ukraine with Patriot air defenses, according to the BBC. Ukraine to receive US air defense systems, says Trump. US President Donald Trump has said that he will send weapons, including the Patriot air defense system, to Ukraine via NATO. Trump told NBC News that in a new deal, we are going to be sending new Patriots to NATO and that NATO will then distribute that, adding that NATO would pay for the weapons. He said NATO is going to reimburse the full cost of the weapons sent on to Ukraine. NATO is funded through the contribution of its members, including the United States. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio told reporters on Friday that he had urged countries including Germany and Spain to hand over some of the existing Patriot batteries as they could reach Ukraine faster. We have continued to encourage our NATO allies to provide those weapons, since they have them in their stocks. Then we can enter into a financial agreement. Then we can purchase the replacement, he said. As Ukraine was pounded by record numbers of drone attacks this week, Trump said more weapons would be sent. We have to. They're getting hit very hard now. Patriot air defense batteries and the interceptor missiles they fire play a critical role in defending Ukrainian cities, civilian and military infrastructure from Russian cruise and ballistic missile attacks, alongside Soviet-era S-300 surface-to-air missiles and Western-made NASAMS. The Patriots helps Ukraine maintain what the military often calls a layered defense. With its advanced radar and tracking and high interception rate, the Patriot is a highly effective weapon without which Ukraine would struggle to protect itself against Moscow's relentless bombardments. Now, Putin escalated his attacks on Ukraine, according to the BBC. Ukraine suffers the heaviest attack as Trump criticizes Putin. President Zelensky says Ukraine has been hit by the biggest ever aerial attack from Russia after 728 drones and 13 cruise or ballistic missiles struck cities around the country in multiple waves. It comes precisely at a time when so many efforts have been made to achieve peace, to establish a ceasefire, yet only Russia continues to rebuff them all. We get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin, if you want to know the truth, Trump told reporters. He's very nice to us all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless. Trump said he was very unhappy. He wants to go all the way. He just keeps killing people. It's no good, Trump said of Putin. Now you have the warhawks in DC that want Trump to go even harder on Putin and put more sanction on Russia and on Russians' oil to crush Russian economy. Lindsey Graham is exploding, and you can listen why he wants to support Ukraine, even though the Ukrainians are losing ground and are losing men in the front lines.
They're sitting on $10 to $12 trillion of critical minerals in Ukraine. They could be the richest country in all of Europe. I don't want to give that money and those assets to Putin to share with China. If we help Ukraine now, they can become the best business partner we ever dreamed of. That $10 to $12 trillion of critical mineral assets could be used by Ukraine and the West, not given to Putin and China. This is a very big deal how Ukraine ends. Let's help them win a war we can't afford to lose. Let's find a solution to this war. But they're sitting on a gold mine to give Putin $10 or $12 trillion of critical minerals that he will share with China is ridiculous. Is Putin going to stop in Ukraine?
I don't believe he is, sir. I think he'll
What do you
go
think?
until...
What do you think, Secretary? Is he going to stop?
Remains to be seen, Senator.
Well, he says he's not. I mean, you know, this is the 30th all over. It doesn't remain to be seen. He tells everybody around what he wants to do.
Trump was at a NATO summit and was asked why he was unable to end this war.
But you've now been in office for 5 months and 5 days. Why have you not been able to end the Ukraine war?
Because it's more difficult than people would have any idea. Vladimir Putin has been more difficult. Frankly, I had some problems with Zelensky. You may have read about him.